morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically Me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. So how are you guys doing today? I hope you guys have been having a good week so far, a good beginning of your new year. I don't know if you guys have made any resolutions or not. I myself have kind of given up on that, but I definitely have some things that I would like to accomplish this year. Some of that will be hopefully helped out by you guys. But other than that, really just every year is like every day to me. Just every day I wake up, try to do a little bit better than I did yesterday. Try to be thankful and enjoy every minute of the day. It's hard sometimes to not get caught up in what you need to do, right? Like I have things I need to do today. At the same time, it's the little things that really matter. It's the memories that you make with your kids and your families and loved ones, your significant others. That's what means the most at the end of things. And I don't mean to sound morbid, but it really is something that when you look at the things that I look at on a daily basis, you really start to put things into perspective and you see how fragile life is. This year, I want to be a lot more aware of what's important to me and to my family. So that's not really a resolution. It's just a feeling I want to go into the year with, and I would like to maintain that feeling throughout the year so that not only can I achieve goals that I have, but so that I can really enjoy every day that I have. All right, enough of the sappiness. Let's get on with things. Bryan Kohberger. He's quite the interesting character, is he not? We're finding out a lot about him. What's true and what's not at this point is questionable. A lot of things are in hindsight at this point, as it commonly is. But let's talk about some of the things that are being said about Bryan, because he, according to people that have spoken out about him so far, fits a certain type of person. A type of person that I've talked about in other cases. We've heard from many that he was quiet. He was to himself. He was even a bit socially awkward. He was very awkward around girls at a young age, and then he was awkward around women in his adult years. He may or may not have been a mama's boy. It's been said that his mom posted to her social media that she would be crying for days after her son had left for Washington to pursue his doctorate in criminology. So upset, in fact, that she would probably not even be able to work. We also know his dad traveled over 2,500 miles just to drive back with him to Pennsylvania. This is a 28-year-old man, still very much relying on mommy and daddy. I mean, this is all alleged. This is from posts that I have found. Did his mom know what type of man she raised? The family has spoken out, and they have said that they are going to stand by their son and brother. We've heard that Bryan Kohberger was fairly intelligent, and while he was very quiet, he did speak about things that he knew of well, and he expected whoever was listening to understand that he was very smart about these things. A know-it-all, if you will. As a child, he was overweight and he was frequently bullied pretty badly from what I understand. And this has been said by a few classmates of his growing up. It has also been said that he developed a habit or an addiction to heroin, which has also been said by a few classmates, but it's not been confirmed by family or anyone of relevance. So we can take that with a grain of salt, because that could have just been a rumor that was circulating about him, because allegedly he came back to school very, very thin his senior year, to the point where people thought he could have been sick. But we've also heard from his aunt, who said that he was vegan, but he was like a whole other level of vegan, asking her to get rid of any pots and pans that had meat ever cooked in them. His aunt said almost like OCD type eating habits. That being said, that's a big lifestyle change that could certainly cause someone to lose a lot of weight. So I'm not going to take the heroin rumor and run with it. To be completely frank, I don't think that someone with a heroin addiction would be able to commit this crime. So in my very unprofessional opinion, I don't think he was using anymore, if he ever was. We have heard from a neighbor who spoke with Chronicles of Olivia that Bryan Kohberger had some really odd habits of being up all night, running water in the bathroom, vacuuming, and that they had only ever witnessed him with a female once. Otherwise, he was always to himself. He was always alone. This is very interesting because Steve Gonsalves also spoke with Chronicles of Olivia, and he mentioned that there might be a connection between Kaylee and Bryan after all. Steve mentioned a time that Kaylee was on a break from Jack and she'd gone out on a date with a man. Allegedly, this man called her a bitch and asked her to fix him some quesadillas. She felt insulted and she immediately left. Was the woman at the apartment Kaylee Gonsalves? This would coincide with him having a woman over at his apartment once. Whoever Kaylee was on that date with sounds like a complete misogynist, right? Which we kind of see in Bryan Kohberger. And how do we see this? Well, we can look at his behavior while he was in a holding cell. A woman was questioned when leaving the jail where she was being held on a DV charge from an incident with her boyfriend at a hotel. And she explained that she was in a cell, kitty corner, to Bryan Kohberger, and that he was taunting the guards that were watching over him. The woman's name is Valerie Cipollina, and she said that she heard him say, quote, "You come in here and I'll cut you," unquote. She also said that he was repeatedly exposing himself and singing violent rap lyrics. In another instance, Valerie stated that Bryan said to another security guard, quote, "I'm going to pee on your face and do whatever you want with me. I don't give a shit," unquote. She also said Bryan repeatedly lifted up his shirt and the guards kept having to tell Bryan to put his pants back on. One of the lyrics that she did overhear was, quote, "Fuck my enemies and foes," unquote, which is actually lyrics from a Lil Wayne song. And according to Valerie, he was also saying some other very violent and misogynistic lyrics from songs by the artist Bad Bunny. I wonder if she knew these lyrics. Because if so, like, you're listening to this music. Anyway, Valerie said that when one of the guards told Bryan to shut up and calm down, Bryan responded by saying, quote, "Come on in, you come in here and let's talk," unquote. She said after that, he then screamed at the top of his lungs, quote, "Come in, all of you. You scared of me? You should be scared of me. You're going to do nothing to me because I'm going to cut all of you up. Come into this cell and I'll show you I'm a creeper. Come into this cell and I'll cut you up too," unquote. Valerie was in a holding cell for 6 hours on a DV charge, as I said. And I think it's safe to say she had the hold of a lifetime. 6 hours of listening to Bryan ranting and screaming and being all sorts of effed up. However, a reporter outside of the jail interviewed a couple of the security guards watching over Bryan, and they reported that Bryan was actually curled up in a ball on the floor of his cell, facing a wall.
The guards, I spoke to a couple of the guards, to be honest with you, and one of them told me that he's curled up in a ball, facing the wall, and he's not saying anything at all. So that's the current status.
So it would appear that if these things are all true, because they're all alleged, I mean, it's hearsay, that Bryan's dealing with quite a bit of emotions since being arrested. I think it's very fair to say he's going through it, as he should be. And it's going to be very interesting to see how he continues to go through it. When I heard the way he was acting in the cell with the lyrics and the threatening to cut people, it really stuck out to me because his public defender has said that Bryan can't wait to get back to Idaho to exonerate himself. That's why he waived extradition. He wanted the process sped up so that he could exonerate himself. But the things that Valerie Cipollina has said that came out of Bryan's mouth, in my opinion, prove exactly how crazy he is, and telling the security guards that he will cut them too. And he even called himself a creeper, which is how many people who knew him describe him. Quote, "A creepy loner who went from being perpetually exhausted to eerily chattier after the murders took place," unquote. Bryan Kohberger grew up in the Poconos with his parents and sister Melissa, who currently works as a mental health care nurse. As I mentioned earlier, Bryan was bullied, but when he came back to school after he had lost all of that weight, he soon became the aggressor. It was said he wanted desperately to fit in with the popular kids, but he lacked the social skills needed for that. So let's break down what we know so far. Bryan Kohberger was an antisocial person who kept strange hours. It seemed as though he never slept. He was almost always alone. Another classmate said he would frequently come to class late with a coffee completely exhausted on the days leading up to the murders. Quote, Bryan seems like he was on the knife's edge between exhaustion and worn out. It was very difficult to tell which was which, unquote. There was also a bar owner in Pennsylvania who owned the bar Seven Sirens Brewing Company. I want to be clear, this is the bar that people are talking about. It's in Pennsylvania, where he's from, where his parents live. It is not the Corner Club. It is not a bar in Washington. It's not another bar in Idaho. It is a bar in Pennsylvania. Anyway, this owner said that Bryan would harass women at the bar and that they actually had to put a note about Bryan in the company's system. He said Bryan would ask women who they were there with and where they lived, and that if he received no answer or the women ignored him, he would get upset. He even called a woman a bitch when she ignored him. When the bar owner confronted Bryan about this, Bryan acted as though the owner was confusing him with someone else, like he would never do such a thing. It was also said in the media that Bryan was completely quiet when one of his classes were discussing the Idaho murders. I can only assume that tore him up inside to listen to all of that speculation circling the classroom about the killer, knowing that he's the one who allegedly committed the crime. Did this eat at him so greatly that he needed to go home and get online and let out what he really wanted to say? We're going to get into Bryan Kohberger and some online posts and communications on 4chan and Reddit. And we're also going to get into Bryan Kohberger's ego. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. I'm not sure we're going to talk about that in this video, but we are definitely going to be getting into that. It has also been confirmed that Bryan Kohberger switched his license plates and his registration from Pennsylvania to Washington 5 days after the murder. That was even before we heard about the Elantra. It has come out that Bryan Kohberger had, in fact, been stalking his victims for months. His cell phone pings for the last few months leading up to the murders lined up with the victims' locations many times. We also heard about 2 skinned animals in the area just before the killings, within a couple of weeks or so. Is it possible that Bryan was reaching a point where he was getting antsy? He couldn't wait any longer to commit these murders. I mean, he's stalking them, allegedly. He's following them around, so these phone pings suggest. I mean, he's waiting in the woods watching them, and he comes across an animal and he just can't help himself. Yes, he's a vegan. That doesn't mean shit, right? He killed people, for fuck's sake. So it has also been said by someone who is very close to one of the officers that was following Bryan Kohberger around once they had learned of him and they were kind of on his tail, that Bryan was wearing gloves when going out to the grocery store. The FBI had been tracking him for 4 days while they were working on this probable cause warrant. Another former FBI agent made a comment during an interview saying that Bryan Kohberger's arrogance is what got him caught. And he made mention of Locard's exchange principle, or Locard's exchange principle, which states that every contact leaves a trace. The exchange piece, meaning any perpetrator will bring something into the crime scene and will also leave with something from the crime scene. Wherever he steps, whatever he touches, whatever he leaves, even unconsciously, will serve as a silent witness against him. Not only his fingerprints or his footprints, but his hair, the fibers from his clothes, the glass he breaks, the tool mark he leaves, the paint he scratches, the blood or semen he deposits or collects. All of these and more bear mute witness against him. This is evidence that does not forget. It is not confused by the excitement of the moment. It is not absent because human witnesses are. It is factual evidence. Physical evidence cannot be wrong. It cannot perjure itself. It cannot be wholly absent. Only human failure to find it, study, and understand it can diminish its value. Bryan Kohberger clearly thinks he's smarter than a cop simply because he was educated in that field, but experience trumps academics any day of the week and twice on Sundays. It would be very interesting to know, did Bryan wear gloves when he committed this murder? Did he wear a Tyvek suit, tie up his hair? Did he put booties over his shoes, knowing that he was going to be stomping through a lot of blood? How well thought out was this? with Bryan's ego and his arrogance. I wonder what he felt during those pre-dawn hours when the FBI banged on the door of his parents' home and raided it. Was he shocked? Was he excited? Was he ready for this? Because it's been being said, and I've even said it myself, that some of us feel he wanted to create the perfect crime. But I'm starting to question, was that all that he wanted? Maybe he wanted to be caught. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But once he was caught and brought in for interrogation, his interrogation lasted allegedly only about 10-15 minutes max before he asked for a lawyer. Once Bryan had a lawyer speak for him, the lawyer answered the question of whether or not Bryan asked if anyone else had been arrested, which a lot of people have focused on. And Bryan's lawyer says that he has no idea. Basically, no. Bryan could have asked that. He's just telling his lawyer that he didn't, or maybe he doesn't remember asking it, or maybe he never asked it. I don't really think that that detail is super important right now, because if anyone else is in connection with this, they're gonna find that out. And from what it looks like, from what we've learned, just in this very short amount of time since Bryan's been arrested, Bryan looks to have completed this entirely on his own, for his own sick, sadistic kicks. We can speculate already with the Reddit posts and the way he's behaving in the holding cell. He's playing games. He is full of games, mind games, and he wouldn't be the first person to do that, nor to say something like this, just trying to one last time throw out some doubt. John Wayne Gacy made a statement very similar to this when he was arrested, and we all know how that turned out. This is a statement made to cast reasonable doubt, which, as many of you know, is the only thing the defense has to prove. The burden is always on the prosecution, but if the defense raises enough reasonable doubt, or any reasonable doubt for that matter, you have a very strong chance of not getting a conviction. The defense is asking for a psych evaluation, and this is typical. A crime of this magnitude, the injuries, the possible taunting of investigators, the game playing, which we'll get into in another video. And like I say all the time, I'm not a professional, but I don't really expect anything to come of this psych evaluation. I certainly do not think he is mentally messed up in the head to where he didn't know what he was doing. I think Bryan's mentally sound. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. I think he was proud of himself. And the more I look into this, I'm not so sure he wanted to get away with it necessarily. I think he hoped he would get away with it, because I think he would have went on. These urges that he was having, I think they became to be too much. I would think that he would have eventually done this again. Some people are thinking that he's already done this before, that this is not the first time that he's killed, but I think that it is. And I think a lot of times, like with Jeffrey Dahmer, it starts with animals and then goes to people after some time. It'd be interesting to know, had he done anything to animals that we can actually prove. But again, this guy is so messed up, it's not hard to see. I think he hoped he'd get away with it, but he made a lot of mistakes. I don't know if it was just that he couldn't contain himself once he had done what he did. Like, was he so wrapped up in adrenaline that he screwed up? Or did he want to go down for this? Did he want people to know that it was him after a while? He was so proud of what he had done and so irritated by how stupid we were all being in thinking that it was these kids, that he actually wanted to get caught after a while because he wanted to say, it was me.
Listening to the press conference after Bryan's hearing today, as I record this is January 3rd, 6:20 p.m. Central Time, a remark was made that they felt that he was in a rush to waive extradition so that he could get back to Idaho to exonerate himself. But it was more suspected that, you know how that probable cause affidavit is sealed until it is given to him in Idaho, because that's the way Idaho does it. He doesn't even know what the probable cause was for the warrant. And so until he gets to Idaho, he himself doesn't even know what the probable cause was. That's why he wants to hurry up and get there, because he's very anxious to see what they said about him and how he was caught for this crime. And I think that says a lot as well.
There will be people that say, do not glorify this man. This is what he wanted. And I can agree that it is possible that it is what he wanted. But I think what's important about putting Bryan Kohberger's face and what Bryan Kohberger did out there
is that it shows people that no matter what you think you know about committing a crime, you're gonna get caught. In this day and age, it's almost impossible to commit the perfect crime. This case in particular, given Bryan's education in criminology, I mean, the guy was going for a PhD. He was intelligent in forensics, crime scenes. He studied serial killers. He was the best in his class, according to a professor. The fact that he was caught goes to show that even the most educated in crime and murder can and will be caught. So I think it's setting an example in this case in particular. Just going over again what we have learned about Bryan Kohberger. He made a lot of mistakes that led to him being caught. I cannot ignore that, but it is possible he was fine with being caught. He may, and in his twisted ass mind, be thinking right now that he even knows how to exonerate himself of this crime. And he's going to enjoy every minute in court listening to the gruesome details of his crime. I am very interested in knowing if this is going to be televised. It's been said that the hearing in Idaho will be televised, but I don't know if that's true or not. I am very eager to see his face and his body language and his emotion while in court. I think it will tell us a lot about exactly how sick this man really is and what his true motives for this murder really were. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will catch you guys on the next one. Like I said, there have been anonymous posts on 4chan, anonymous posts on Reddit from a certain individual, a certain username, and we are going to get into all of that on the next video. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you are notified. Please like, please comment. Like I said, we don't always have to agree. That is what I'm asking these questions for. I want to know what you guys think. Talk to you guys later.